Good morning, viewers. Welcome to this edition of Focus on Parliament. I am Agather Atuhaire, your host, and today we want to look at the events that have unfolded in the House during the past 1 week. I think main on the agenda being the proposal by government of Uganda to buy shares in Roko Construction Company Limited at a tune of about 207 billion shillings. It was passed yesterday in a controversial manner, according to people who watched how that unfolded. And we have a panel here that is going to discuss what that deal or that proposal means for Ugandans, for taxpayers, or for government. And also we look at the procedures of how Parliament resolutions are passed and if this meets those procedures. We'll also look at the Public Health Amendment Bill that was also passed on Wednesday this week. And the bill amends the Public Health Bill that was passed in the 1930s. And there was need to, with the evolving illnesses and contagious diseases like what we have faced in the last 2 years and still facing, to provide for them. And also there were some controversies in them. And to discuss all that and more that might come up in the course of the discussion are three gentlemen, members of Parliament, to put this into perspective. And I welcome you to the show. I am going to begin from my left.
Thank you very much, viewers. Thank you, our host, Agatha. My name is Paul Omara, Member of Parliament for Otuke County. I sit on the Budget Committee and also on the Committee of Finance, Planning and Economic Development.
You're welcome, Honourable Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to the show. The next is Honourable Jonathan Odur. You're welcome to the show. Honourable, please say hello to our viewers.
Thank you very much. Good morning, our viewers. I'm a Member of Parliament representing Erute County South in Lira District. I'm also the Shadow Minister for Defence and Veteran Affairs. I sit on committees of human rights and also defence and internal affairs.
You're welcome. You're most welcome, Honourable. Last but not least is the chairman of the Health Committee in Parliament, Honourable Charles Ayume. Doctor, you're very welcome to the show, Honourable.
Thank you, Agatha. Good morning, viewers. My name is Dr. Charles Ayume, Member of Parliament of Koboko Municipality, and I chair the Parliamentary Committee on Health. And I also sit on the HIV/AIDS Committee.
You're welcome, Honourable, and we are going to go right into it. I would like us to start with the proposal to buy shares, 150,000 shares in Roko Construction Company. And I'm going to start with you, Honourable Paul. You have been in this on this issue a lot. I think you should really start by telling us what this deal, this proposal means for both sides, but especially Ugandans.
Thank you very much, viewers. The proposal to buy shares in Roko was brought to Parliament by the Ministry of Finance, and the matter was sent to the Committee of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, where I'm a member. The committee took a lot of time, a week, to review that request. Many entities were invited before the committee for their opinions, and that were received. Within the committee itself, we had a very robust debate about the proposal and what it would mean for the country. Now, let me say the most important things that the government presented as the key points when they were making the request. One is that Roko is a Ugandan brand, well known, and they have done great jobs in terms of working on our skylines with many good buildings all over the place. That we agreed with them. And secondly is that Roko had a pipeline of projects that they were undertaking, which needed to be completed. And we looked at the projects that Roko was doing, and we said that is equally a good thing. Now, the problem, however, was that Roko was actually in big problems financially. In huge debt, it's having a lot of debts, having very sticky account receivables with a lot of litigations. It was moving towards bankruptcy and liquidation, really. Now, on principle, we actually agreed that we should rescue Roko as a committee. So on principle, we said we totally agree that we should save the brand. And according to the president's letter, which we have received, is that Uganda should buy equity in Roko. And the same recommendation from the president, we also agreed with him that let us domesticate the share ownership of Roko, if it may, to Ugandanize the ownership.
The company, yeah.
Yes, so it becomes like a public enterprise.
Yes.
So then we noted that as much as Roko was riddled in debt, we could save it. And the question now, the point of contention became how. The proposal which was on the table was that we would buy preference shares in Roko instead of ordinary shares up to a tune of 207 billion. That would be 150,000 shares. We had a problem with that because there was no valuation which was done on the company. And previously there was a recommendation that a grade 1 audit firm should do an audit so that we can have the power value of that company. We know what it is really worth. So we're saying, what is it that we are buying? Government said, no, we are not buying any shares in Roko. It is quite controversial in terms of the manner in which it was being argued.
Yeah.
So giving a preference shares, that would mean actually you give Roko money, you're actually like a creditor again to Roko, but you have nothing to do with it in terms of management and control. They came with a recommendation that 2 people be put on the board in terms of the agreements that they had made. But we said, having 2 people only on the board they'll say they will have overriding powers. But legally, we felt it was not something that would pertain. Our preference was that since Roko had a share capital of 15 billion only, then we are giving 207 billion. We said, let's pick 16 billion and buy 51% shares of Roko. We become the majority shareholder. After all, they are going down.
Yes.
Ordinarily, we would do what we call a hostile takeover. We basically come and then give them anything. So we said, let's put 16 billion in ordinary shares. Then the balance that's remaining goes on preference shares. And then Roko will hold 49, we hold 51. And as a majority shareholder, we can always put more money to resuscitate it. We take over the management, the board, and making sure that the corporate governance issues that was there can be corrected. And then we put Roko on a platform which it can become good. The problem was government then came back. After we had agreed as a committee, we were all very happy. We said, this is the best we can do for Roko. And we agreed as a committee, it was in our minutes, and we said that would be our recommendation to the House. But the following day, we had a meeting because we were supposed to review it on Monday. Then the chairman told us, said, no, we had additional information from government to the effect that government is not interested in owning Roko. And also the financier is not interested in giving money and then government passes it order to buy equity in Roko. We were all confused. We said, now, what is this now? And that is when there was a split in the committee, where others said, no, we are no longer going. If you are not going by what was recommended,
Yes.
then it's a no-go and a no-brainer. We are not going to support this. And then you had the minority report, which Magashi Bumi presented. And the speaker then later on said, okay, if you have not done valuation, then what is it in this thing? Because recommendation previously was a first-class audit firm should come and do this thing so that we know its value. And there was a strong case that we should actually have shares, ordinary shares in Roko, and we own it.
Yeah.
And so then the speaker then said, let's go and government go and do valuation. Harmonize the position and come back.
Okay, Honourable, let me first
Yeah.
hold you right there. And I'll have follow-up questions for you on that,
Yeah,
but let me
yeah.
first bring in Honourable Odur.
Yeah.
I have been told by my sources there, and following really the debate, that you are also one of the people that were vocal against this deal. Well, Honourable Omara says for him, his issue was on the way of rescuing it. In principle, rescuing it is okay. He's okay with it. For you, what was your exact disagreement with this proposal?
Thank you very much. I think for us to, and our viewers to understand, we have to go back a little bit in history.
Yeah.
In 2020, and many Ugandans should recall this, there was an attempt by the executive to introduce what they called a bail-out package, which angered a lot of Ugandans and generated a lot of debate. At that time, one of the companies that was listed for that bailout was Roko. But the 10th Parliament, given the prevailing situation then, the COVID situation had affected nearly all Ugandans, all businesses were struggling. The 10th Parliament resolved that if government intends to bail out the economy or companies, it must then have in place a clear policy and guideline on how these companies can be bailed out. So Parliament then rejected the idea of bailout because they found that it was not sustainable, it was discriminative, because government had already identified, after all, the companies they wanted to bail out. There was evidence that so many other companies that in the description of the executives, the brands, Ugandan brand companies, were actually struggling, that needed to be helped. So Parliament then directed that you go back and think about a package that will take care of all Ugandan companies that are struggling, so that it is transparent. Two, Parliament then recommended that since we have Uganda Development Bank, UDB, money should be put in UDB, which that time was done. I recall about 500 billion was appropriated by Parliament, put in UDB for companies that are stressed to go and access. The reasoning was, and my brother Paul is a banker, banks have very robust system of testing whether a business can be supported and they are going to recover.
Yes.
If the bank forecasts your cash flows and looks at your management practices, corporate governance, and their challenges, they are likely not to give you the money. So the intention of Parliament was, let's not throw money to companies that are collapsing. Because in business, you can project easily that in 2-3 years, this company is going to collapse and it's going to close. And that was the decision of Parliament. So it was quite surprising that this 11th Parliament and the executive trying to take advantage of the new composition of Parliament, new members of Parliament who have not really taken time to look through what has been decided in the past, including committees of finance that are comprised of new members. They set a trap through this Roko motion so that they achieve what they failed to do in the earlier Parliament. I had expected, and these are our objections, that whereas every Parliament has its mandate, but Parliament does not work in isolation. even if I give example of courts of law, once a certain high court sat, even if it's 10 years, you just don't come and give another decision on that.
Yeah.
If you are to do that, you must distinguish why you are departing from
Yes.
the earlier decision made by that judge or that court. So even Parliament, it's applicable to Parliament, that before you vacate any decision made by previous Parliament, there must be a compelling reason that can distinguish it from the previous one, which did not happen. Now, the information that came to the House about Roko is that some people identified Roko as one company among thousands of companies and claimed that it is the Ugandan brand, so needs to be helped and needs to be helped very urgently, and the proposal was taken to the president. Now, as the president, I think he appreciated the concerns and directed in a letter that you see the possibility of helping Roko because it's part of a company that has been doing quality work here and has a lot of government projects, and they do good work, but do it in accordance with the law. Now, once the president issues an executive order or directive, the government structures are supposed to implement it, but look at the law. What does the law say?
Yes.
And the president directed at that time that Roko should be, due diligence should be done.
Yes.
And Roko should be valued.
Yes.
Which valuation was estimated to cost 800 million shillings. The people who are proposing or who are part of the scheme, the fraud, I'm afraid I should call it, decided to inform government that they cannot find 800 million. So it is not necessary, that there is no money for the valuation. The executive director of UDC, Uganda Development Corporation, that should help, using the information available, looked at the audited books of, and I quote, if I recall very well, Roko is too ill a patient to be operated on something like that.
It needs to be stabilized.
Exactly.
I think I read that in the report. Yeah.
And my brother, Dr. Ayume, is here. He knows when you say that a patient is actually in ICU.
To resuscitate them.
Yes, yes. So what the director, the ED of UDC was saying was that basically we are fighting a losing battle. In medical terms, I think there are people whom the doctors decide that whatever you do, this person will not live beyond 6 months. And it comes to pass. So they just tell you to give palliative care, I think, attend and smile with the person and the rest. So this was the state
give
in
them
which...
their best food to eat.
Exactly. This was the state in which Roko was. But to our surprise, the same people now claims that they can find 207 billion. They failed to get 800 million to do due diligence. But now they have 207 million to put there. So what comes first? And this is the strongest argument that we, myself and a few members of parliament were saying. Do you put the cart before the horse?
Yes.
Or the horse should be in front? And so our point is, if you want to make an investment decision, I will come to issue of preference shares. He has mentioned it. Preference shares is basically an investment decision. And you can go for redeemable
or irredeemable,
meaning you have set a rate and the duration, and then you get it back. The company pays you back, basically. Or you can go for irredeemable, which goes with the company up to the end. When it comes to liquidation, then you become number 3, I think. They will pay off the creditors, then pay the secured then now it comes to you. But before even we go that, any person who wants to invest, whether you want to buy land, whether you want to buy a house, you do a due diligence so that you check if it is viable for you to invest. This is the area where the fraudsters are dodging, because by all looks of accounts, you will come to a conclusion that you cannot actually support Roko. It is a dead end to put money.
So Honourable Jonathan, you disagree with Paul Omara on that it is not viable to rescue
I
Roko.
don't only disagree, but I can say that I'm disappointed with the entire finance committee, and specifically disappointed with a very accomplished banker in Paul Omara. But tactfully, Paul did not sign the report, and I know.
And I was about to ask,
Yes,
but I didn't
yes,
see him.
yes. Paul did not sign that report because, as an economist, when you look at what is happening in Roko, first of all, the audited books they have presented appears to be doctored. And this is one of the things we raised, that the audit firm must be queried. When you look at what we call working capital, working capital, it's defined as the current assets minus current liabilities. If you look at what they have posted in their books of accounts, they have current assets of about 397 billion. And then the current liabilities is about 360 something billion, meaning they have working capital of about 16 billion shillings.
Yeah.
Working capital means the money which is available for you to do work. So
yes.
16 billion is not little money in terms of the projects they are going. Some of the projects they have to finish just needs like 10 or 15 billion to finish. The other thing we raised...
In fact, in the 2020 financials, that working capital, which is cash, was put as 20 billion. So if that 20 billion is there,
exactly,
they can use it.
The other thing, when you look at their company documents, the constitution, memorandum and articles of association, what they presented to the committee states that their share capital is 15 billion, 15 or 16.
15
but
billion.
The minister came and told us that it is actually 200 billion.
Their share capital.
Yes, the Minister of State for Finance, Honourable Mosasizi, spoke. And that is the point where the speaker said, wait, what is happening here? Yes. The committee has looked at a set of documents,
yes.
And the document provided to them, 15.
Yes.
The minister says he has another set of documents that confirms that their share capital is actually 200 billion. That means some information was hidden away from the Committee of Parliament. Now, let me even touch how committees of Parliament should do their work. This Committee of Finance of Parliament talked to only 6 stakeholders. This is a very serious matter. Of the 6 stakeholders they spoke to, only 1, or I may say 2, are outside government structures. The rest, Ministry of Finance, the Uganda Development Corporation, they spoke to Attorney General. The 4th one, I don't know. But the other 2 I want to mention is they spoke to Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, and they also spoke to the Association of Ugandan Construction Companies. There's a name for it. Those are the only 2.
Outside government.
And they noted in their report that the pressure put on them could not allow them go out, even in the field, to verify certain things.
That is true.
So they had to... Omara had started by saying we had a lot of time, and he said 1 week, and I wondered, is 1 week a lot of time?
That's why I'm saying that Paul...
I will maybe if I don't want to misrepresent myself or what I'm saying, but I can add this, that we were given 1 week. The speaker only gave us 1 week to look at it, and these people that were lined up for interfacing with, we had to squeeze them even for them to appear before the committee. That also included, again, meeting the Minister of Finance to at least interface with them, given what we had found out, and a lot of reports that we had to go through. Now, we did not have, if I made a mistake, I should say, we did not have sufficient time to look at this thing in a deep way. But nonetheless, after looking at this thing, we found the thing, Roko is very sick. And even in our discussion, we said we are going to bend backwards to accommodate the request which has been made. Because one key issue which Honourable Jonathan has mentioned, which was mandatory, is valuation. I was the one who actually asked the minister myself. I said, did you do valuation of this company? And his answer was a straight no, we didn't do it. And so those are in the report. Now, but then we said, okay, if we have to go forward with even all these advice, there were a lot of things, technically, as I said, you can actually just throw it out. Then I said, okay, for us to make a step forward, to accommodate you, and so that we know it's a tough job that he has been given, to move forward, let us bend backwards, but please, these conditions are now succinct. You must have them done. It's mandatory that we have to do it. We must have equity. That was the thing. Because all that thing that we have been doing is they give money for freebies. We said we can no longer give more money to.
Now I see why Honourable Jonathan is disappointed, because you wanted to make the minister's work easier and bend backwards.
Honourable Paul is very resourceful and is very knowledgeable, and yes. The same I would speak of my brother on health matters. But
please,
the way our parliament, the way our parliament works is that even with the wealth of knowledge that you have, if you don't stand your ground firm, they can turn you around and make you lose out the point you are making. So let me come to who deserves to be helped. In our thinking, in my thinking, Roko is not a Ugandan company, because our laws spread across about 3 different laws. The Company Law, the Land Act, and then the Investment Act defines what is a local Ugandan company and what is a foreign company. Yes. It looks at the ownership. The person who owns majority shares must be a Ugandan for that company to qualify to be called a Ugandan company. The people who own Roko are actually Swiss citizens. The company is incorporated. Is incorporated in Uganda, but incorporation in Uganda does not mean you are, because even me, I can go to Kenya for purpose of doing a business. I can incorporate a business there, but that will not make it a Kenyan company or a Tanzanian company. So one of the questions we are saying, why should you use Ugandan taxpayers' money to bail out a foreign company? Which company will make profit? They will pay their taxes here, but their expenditure they put in the pocket and go back to their country and spend there. Why?
And I think that was included in the president's letter about repatriation of profits, to also assess that.
Yes, he put that, and that was part of the assignment the technocrats should have done in assessing, looking at all those, and that's what they were dodging. Because if they did that, the report to the president would have been different. And I think that if the president was mindful about caring for Ugandan companies, he would have said, no, then we cannot proceed on Roko. So, if this is a Swiss company operating in Uganda, and a Swiss government thinks it's very important to support. I've seen most of these Chinese companies that construct in Uganda get money from their government. Governments actually give money to their companies to go and do business. The Swiss government should do the same to Roko, so that Roko can continue operating here. Now, there is this argument that was sold to the committee and to Parliament, that Roko is doing a lot of government projects. So
and that makes it Ugandan.
It must be helped. No, it must be helped. As if Roko is doing charity.
Let's hold that and we come back to it. But let me bring in Honourable Charles. When you were talking about them taking advantage of the 11th Parliament and new MPs, I think he seemed to disagree on that, because from what Honourable Mara narrated at the beginning, the committee had no problem when it sat and reached a certain position before the chairman came back and said there's a change. So, Honourable Ayume, what was your disagreement about that? But also, what are your general views about this proposal and deal we've entered into with Roko Construction Company?
Well, I wasn't in the house yesterday.
You were in the house on Wednesday. I think that's when the debate was so heated, right?
But I'm wondering how it could have been passed when there were people in attendance. I'm trying to visualize that, and ever since I got the news, I'm wondering why people didn't, rise up and how would the A's have had it if there was general consensus and sentiments about this whole thing. But I first want us to go a bit backwards. That why is it that a number of Ugandan companies are collapsing? I think previously, one of the big boys in the construction industry was Spencon. Yes. They were renowned for bridges and all that, and then they were liquidated and all that. Spencon is no more. Roko, which I had grown up seeing, and the Bank of Uganda and all that, I'm wondering why it also went down the road. In the health sector, they had a number of projects. They had, their first health project was Mulago National Referral Hospital. I think it was $21 million. And which they got against all odds, because when you get a hospital, there's that subtle clause that you should have had works of similar nature. But they beat a number of companies and got Mulago Hospital. We are still not convinced about the completion and the quality of work of the National Referral. Then they go ahead get work in the new Cancer Institute up on the hill, which is supposed to be a regional center of excellence. It's abandoned, and then I think they get another subcontractor. So there have been a bit of issues.
Don't forget your own chamber of parliament.
Yes.
Yes.
Then Parliament,
Which has stalled for many years. Yeah.
Then they also go to Uganda Heart Institute in Mulago, and there were issues to do with their ICU. And remember, the ICU is like the heartbeat of, other than the theater, because from theater, you've done open heart surgery, you've done catheterization, patients have to go to ICU for recuperation. And I want to thank really the director, Dr. Manjema. He really stood firm, back and forth with the Solicitor General. And Roko wanted to get away with it. So my question is that whenever they're being awarded contracts, I thought the contracts committee is supposed to do due diligence. But it seems like Roko has been a tornado over the last 5 years. Get a contract, don't finish it. 2 years down the road, get another contract. And all these 3 contracts of in the health sector were within a space of 500 meters. Mulago Hospital, Cancer Institute, and Heart Institute. So the question is, do we do enough due diligence on companies before we go ahead to award contracts? I think for me, the conversation should begin there. Otherwise, we're going to see situations where directors of companies spend a lavish life. They are banking abroad. They are buying islands in the Indian Ocean and things like that, with the hope that government is going to come and mop the floor. So I think we really need to be a bit tough on who do we bail out. They look at their track record. And in some countries, directors actually go to court. I mean,
you're prosecuted.
You're prosecuted. You understand?
Yeah.
And we started seeing these things when Mark took over, I think he's the main director. What went wrong between his father's demise and now? Was it an issue of did he get
management,
other directors on board who put pressure on him, or was he living beyond his means? Did he bite more? Because there's a time you would traverse this country, and I think Roko had 7 to 8 projects concurrently. So were they biting more than they could chew? What was the banking sector? Did they guide on Roko? So for me, I think to prevent such calamities, because we are seeing a number of companies going down, and for me, I took pride in Roko, saying that it's one of the companies you've grown up. Little did I know it was a matter of time. Now,
but not a Ugandan company.
I think another company now we could take pride in is the Mulwana business empire. I think it has stood the test of time. I hope it doesn't also
go under. But when you were talking about the construction companies, I also remembered Zimwe. Now,
yes.
You wonder why no one ever cared about rescuing Zimwe. And for me, what Honourable Ayume says, the question it raises in me is, who is Roko? Who are the godfathers of Roko in this government? Because when you talk about all the projects they get against all odds, and the projects they get concurrently that they can't even finish them on time, they were supposed to work on the Ruboa Hospital. the stalling Parliament project is still ongoing.
Yeah.
I think now they currently have running projects worth over 1 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
So the question now I ask is, what this favorable treatment hasn't started now? Because that's what this shows, the preferential treatment. How can Roko, and you said you support rescuing it, so you're the one I'm going to ask this question. After getting all these projects that the majority report talks about, it has both with government and the private sector.
Yeah.
How can it still go under and need more money after being supported more than any other construction company in this country in terms of getting contracts?
Just in line with what my brother, Honourable Jonathan said, that some of us are technical, and how in the world would we support something like that? We had time to look at Roko. And in line with what Dr. Honourable Ayume said, is that there were basically 3 issues, and I'll go to what you've asked. Number 1, very poor corporate governance standards at the management and at the board level. Number 2, financial mismanagement, which, because they had cash before, where did the money go? So either living life larger than what the
lavish lifestyle.
Exactly. And number 4, number 3 rather, in completion of projects. So you find all around what they have been trying to do, they could not finish, the money runs out, they leave this one here, they still have that other contract there. So they were not completing projects. Now, so my position and my technical advice to the committee that giving money to Roko just like that is not the solution. It won't solve the problem.
So you're saying if you must give it money,
yes,
give it to it in a different way.
Yes, if you're going to give Roko money, you have seen what the problems they have. Have you solved the problem? They have not solved the problem. Even the contracts which they've said, oh, we are putting 2 people on the boards with the overriding power. I sit on boards. What the boards actually do is like a post-mortem. The camel would have bolted. The management make daily decisions. So by having these preference shares, you're basically not going to be there to watch what they are doing. You're not going to correct the mistakes that they have been doing. So our preposition, having looked at all the things and seen the mistakes, and of course we have now seen the how would you call the pipeline deals, which the contracts that they have got over 1 trillion shillings. We said, if we were to go in and own this company, and then we are be able to put a management team in place, and because we actually asked the Minister of Finance, why haven't you used UDC? It should actually come through the Ministry of Trade. Somebody actually said, because our committee is full of weaklings, and yet we are very strong of finance. Yes, somebody made a joke about it. But so we said this thing should have come through UDC. UDC would have done due diligence and given us a report. But now we said, regardless of that, that is fine. We're going to bend backwards, but this is a sacrosanct. You have to buy shares in this company and own it, and have majority shareholding, put in a strong executive in place, we'll have majority on the board, have a control over it, over management, then we have control audit, we control finance,
Yes.
And then we work with them, at 49%, they will have some members on the board who will have the majority. And then you have strong members on the executive management. Then we would then be able to correct and deal with the management issues and corporate governance issues there, and financial mismanagement. And then we can go for, we will also take dividends. I said, Ugandans are suffering all over the place. You can't get 207 billion and say you're putting in a company. You said, but we're not interested in dividends. Come on. You're not interested in dividends.
And that money was not budgeted for.
Not budgeted for. Of course, now, that money is not going to come in this financial year. It's going to come in financial year 2023, 2024. No, it will be actually budgeted for in that year.
Actually, that is the other angle.
Yes.
That in this whole Roko saga, there is also a proposal in
Yes.
the agreement
Yes.
that they are going to borrow that money from PTA Bank.
PTA Bank, yes.
So what they have decided is that the ministry government, through the Ministry of Finance, would issue a promissory notes or guarantees which is devalued to attract the bank. Like I told you, on the face of it, no bank can lend to Roko.
Roko.
So to make it an attractive business to Roko, you sell a promissory note which is devalued, say, by 50%. So that the bank then now can give the money, and then when they come back, they get it at 100%. Do you see how the fraud is?
Yes.
Which is one mistake or one issue that we had raised in Parliament. Because the moment you are going to borrow money, then you need Parliament Committee on National Economy to look at it. It is not only finance.
Yes. The
You need the national, which was not done. So in terms of floating our own rules, it started at that point. That this agreement is twofold. The aspect of investment, which the Minister of the Committee of Finance has looked at, but also the aspect of borrowing, which is the constitutional matter. We raised it on the floor of Parliament. Then two, Roko being the brand that it is, of recent, all companies are going into the market. I think they call it the capital market, security exchange. They are being listed.
Yes.
MTN did the last one,
Yes.
so that Ugandans can give money. That's how the company raises money. But because they know that no person will put money in the patient who is going to die in the next 24 hours.
People will put money in the patient. People will put.
Jonathan, let me also help you. According to the Capital Market Authority rules, CMA rules, for you to get listed at the security exchange, you must have a track record of profitability.
That's the point.
So they cannot even go.
That's the point.
They don't have a record.
Yes.
Nobody's going to
so you can't invest in something that is not profitable, and you go for it. So
for you, Honourable Jonathan, you have not been convinced by the arguments that were put forward in that proposal about 425 suppliers, Ugandan suppliers. I think over 1,000, almost 2,000 employees.
Let me share with you even
also
another experience. This committee of finance were not even allowed to access to verify whether those suppliers actually exist or not. They said the confidentiality clauses
cannot
allow them reveal to the committee of Parliament.
So
it
even
is
the committee that was given the proposal to review it could not actually review.
If I ask him, he can't tell me.
Could not scrutinize all these.
You know now that there was a rush yesterday to pass this thing.
And that's why I actually want us to discuss that.
We'll come to that.
We'll come to that.
Yes.
But the one thing which was very critical is that we didn't have time to examine everything that we wanted to see. First, we want to see all the creditors of Roko. Find out all the creditors, these account receivables which were there, the debtors, and then these pipelines projects which were given to us to confirm whether those actually projects. That can only come out through valuation.
Exactly.
When you're doing audit and valuation.
Now that confirms
that
actually the committee did a disservice to Parliament. The Committee of Finance did a disservice to the institution of Parliament because they had it within their powers to inform the Speaker and the House that the magnitude of the decision we are going to take affects taxpayers and their money. We should be given more time to process and verify. I had experience in Parliament when an issue came between traders who had claimed that they lost contracts in South Sudan and needed to be compensated. The list was brought. But do you know what happened? Paul Omara Uganda Limited or Jonathan Odur Uganda Limited goes to South Sudan and creates Jonathan Odur South Sudan Limited. And then they claim that they supplied the Ugandan Jonathan Odur company, supplied Jonathan Odur of Sudan. And that's the money they are claiming. That's why it was important to look at Roko, because Roko has affiliate companies. Roko doing work in Rwanda, I think they call themselves Roko Rwanda. Roko in another country. You will find that one of the creditors, the suppliers they want to pay is actually Roko Rwanda. So it is not, we cannot proceed without verifying and confirming that the creditors actually exist. In any case, who is this creditor supplier who supplies things worth 10 billion and sits comfortably for 4 or 5 years and is not even bothered
To ask for their
to
money.
ask for their money? Just think about that.
Confidential supply.
Who is that?
You need help, but you.
The
Every
moment,
detail is
let me tell you,
confidential.
Agatha, if I give you my money, you borrow my money, and next week or after 2 months, they are chasing me for house rent, where do I go first?
To the
Agatha, I'll come and sleep at your home and say, give me, I want to pay my rent. So why is this creditor very comfortable at a distance and not demanding their money? Now we'll come to the last point. Apart from those ones, there are people who owe Roko money. In accounts, they call them debtors.
Yes, account receivable debtors.
Accounts
Yes.
debtors.
Debtors, yeah.
Yes. There is no attempt by Roko to even demand for this money. That's it. There are people who owe them money and they are captured as, I think,
151 billion.
Yes, 150.
Those are Roko's,
Yes.
The debtors.
Roko's
Those are
money, which is out with someone out there.
and it is not looking for it.
Yes. So you look at the two things. First of all, there are people who supplied Roko who are demanding from Roko. Those people are also quiet and comfortable. They are not demanding from Roko. Then Roko also has money with other people to the tune of 151 money they should collect. They have never taken a step to go and recover that money. That raises a question because in accounts, if you have attempted to recover your money and it appears to you that you can no longer recover,
Right
you
now.
either do a provision for bad debts
Yes.
or you actually write them as
Write
bad
them.
debts.
Yes.
In Roko's books, you don't see that.
Let me add that in the report, they said even those debtors, it is marred with a lot of litigation where people are disputing, maybe owing Roko some money. And then in court, that was only in court about 57 billion. And I told the minister, I said, Roko basically have no cash because that cash which is on the debtor side is not going to come back. So you have it in your books of accounts. I agree with Honourable Jonathan that it should have been written off. We gave as much technical advice as possible. That's why, by the way, I did not sign that report. I
You disowned it.
I gave them my technical advice. I said, in the scheme of things, this is the best scenario we should work. And the moment they refused, I said, Chairman, there you are.
Okay, before we go for a break,
Yeah.
Honourable Ayume, I want you to answer for us this question. When you people are in Parliament, you're representing Ugandans.
Yes.
Ugandans have been up in arms and saying we can't afford life.
Yes.
The fuel is high.
Yeah.
The soap and the sugar, we can't afford them anymore. And the president and his PSST have insisted we cannot intervene. It is bad economics.
Yes.
What does this mean that a president and a government which is not intervening in the basic needs of its people is intervening in rescuing a company that is supposed to be profit-making, that has been getting projects that should finance it to a tune of 200 billion, which would have actually helped these other Ugandans? You as the representatives of the people, I'll start with you, Honourable. Are you?
Well, there is the reality, and then there's possibly the fiction. Yeah, but of course the reality is what we are seeing here, the increased standard of living, fuel prices and all that. It's global. It's not only...
But some governments have intervened.
Yes, some governments have intervened. But in broad terms, it's global. And fuel is a very important driver of so many things.
Yeah.
The cost of food, transportation and all that, because food has to be transported and all that.
Yeah.
And that's why you see, I think a week ago, Joe Biden was in the Middle East. Of course, he went passed by Israel and all that, but I think one of the objectives was to go to Saudi Arabia and discuss the issue of fuel and telling them to pump so that you increase
the supply
and inflation, and it will go down. And we saw that happen, I think, in 2012 when a barrel dropped from, I think, $145 to $37. And again, it was still the same thing with Russia. I think there was a bit of feathers ruffled between the US and Russia, and I think the US told the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to pump more oil, so that to crush the Russian ruble. And I think that visit again is supposed to have Saudi Arabia pump more oil. So hopefully the US anticipates that in the next 6 months we shall see the cost of fuel go down. And for them, I think as a country, one of the intervention measures we're talking about is they hoard fuel in the US. The US produces oil, but they hoard it. But I think their parliament took a decision to use their reserves for at least 6 months. Whether it has helped them, well, that's subject for discussion. But hopefully the next 6 months, we will see a lot of maybe fuel in circulation. Whether our fuel will drop from 6,000 or 7,000 back to, that is now where I'll put government to task, because we have more fuel, and I've never seen fuel reverse from the time I started driving. Even when the global situation changes,
when the barrel drops, the pump price does not drop.
And still, that's what you members of parliament should do.
They'll still leave it there. Now, probably I think in East Africa there must be a cabal or some cartel right from Mombasa that's controlling this thing into the hinterland. And I think that's time our ministers leave Kampala and go and pitch at the East African level. I come from a border district, and fuel is cheaper. So
you can go and be fuel from Koboko.
never know.
It has been done before.
It's coming. But I think we should get off our chairs here and go to East Africa, go to Mombasa. I think you people are in Mombasa, and try and understand these cabals, these networks, because I think there are people behind the scenes who are benefiting from this situation. So I think government can intervene, but of course, for a number of times we have been believing in a free market economy, that the forces of demand and supply will dictate. But I mean, there's a limit.
So they
to every
dictate
prison.
on things that affect us. They don't dictate on Roko and other companies. But gentlemen,
there's a limit to every principle.
Yeah. Let's take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to actually go into the question Charles started with. Yes, Honourable Charles, I have a problem with titles. I hope people bear with me on this show. So the question was that he doesn't also understand how this thing passed in Parliament yesterday. And we have a hint, you people who were there have a hint. So that's what we also should talk about, the procedure, and if it was the right procedure. We will be right back.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from that short commercial break, and we're glad you're still with us. And we're still discussing the issues of Roko Construction Company Limited, where government tabled a proposal in Parliament for it to buy shares worth 207 billion in it. And we are looking at its viability, but also the rationale behind that, with everything that Ugandans are struggling with. But now what we want to look at is actually how it was eventually passed by Parliament on Thursday. On Wednesday, there had been a heated debate where most of the MPs had actually expressed disagreement with the proposal. And on Thursday, there was a question that was put, and I want the honourable members here to explain to us what the rules say about that. A question to vote on it, and many members of Parliament say, but also visiting footage say that people actually did not say yes. The question is put, and they ask the ayes and the noes, and the majority were actually no. But the speaker who was sitting, being the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Honourable Taiwa, said the ayes have it and left. Honourable Mara, if you were in Parliament, can you please explain to us what happened and if it is right or wrong, and if there's any remedy to remedy that, because the Parliament is supposed quorum is essential, a vote is essential.
Thank you very much. I was in Parliament, but on matters of parliamentary procedures and the aspect of law, I have my senior brother here. I would rather pass that back to him.
Now I know, like he refused to sign the committee report. But Honourable Jonathan,
he is more knowledgeable with the rules. What the rules say, I don't have it.
Yes. Yeah, so I think the starting point for our viewers to understand is that for business to come to the house, we have an order paper. An order paper simply means the agenda of the day. And it is known basically that for any meeting to take place and be meaningful, members must be notified. Notice must be given of a meeting and the issues that are going to be discussed in that meeting. So under rules of procedure, rule number 26, the order paper must be given to members of Parliament not less than 3 hours to the sitting. Or members must be notified of an item that will appear on the order paper not less than 3 hours. So either the order paper comes with the item, or in case the order paper has been printed and sent in advance, and there something comes that is urgent that must be included, at the beginning of the sitting, that notice must be given so that it formally enters the order paper. So we received the order paper for Thursday. It had no item. And our order paper is drawn in a way that the items are listed from prayers up to adjournment, and it is assigned. But to show members and inform them of what will come after, maybe in the next sitting, they also put down and say business to follow. But in terms of interpretation, business to follow is not part of the order paper.
For that day.
Yes, it's just the notice. So to save resources of sending 2 different documents, there is space there, you put it. So there was no item on the agenda of Parliament for discussion concerning the motion. Now you have rightly pointed out that when we discussed on Wednesday, the House spoke in unison, asking the questions we have shared with you here. The minister couldn't respond. He actually conceded before us that some matters have just come to his attention. Like we have mentioned, the share capital presented to the committee was 15 billion, but later it emerged that it's 200 billion. The constitution doesn't provide for preference shares. They are just only notified the registrar that they intend to amend to include preference shares. So that information, plus other queries, the due diligence that was not done, the analysis we did in terms of their audit report of 2020 and 2021, that is what made the Speaker to say, we cannot now proceed to make a decision on this matter, and I am now making a ruling that the Minister of Finance goes back, clarifies on all these matters before Parliament can continue with the debate and then take a decision. Now, ministers clarify to Parliament through a statement under our Rule 53. The minister must bring a statement, and the statement must be in writing. So that was the position taken on Wednesday. So if there was need yesterday for this matter to come on the floor, the Speaker ought to have, first of all, formally notified member notice, which was not complied with, and he didn't up to the end. So
was it on the order paper?
It wasn't. So he ought to have at the beginning, because we have 3 hours from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So after 5, he could have now introduced the 3 hours rule, would have been complied with. The Speaker did not do that. So towards the end, when he was supposed to adjourn, the matters, all the items of the order paper had been disposed of. We were discussing something or a statement on malaria, how to prevent. The Speaker from nowhere says, colleagues, I have received information from the executive, and we cannot wait. This matter must be decided now, or else Roko will die. So I am going to put the question. At that moment, I was in the house. I rose up on the issue of procedure, because the correct way, if it was urgent, is that the mover of the motion is the Minister of Finance, should have come back in the House and then moved the motion to resume debate on that matter, because he's the one who moved the motion. So he should have come, since debate was adjourned on Wednesday. So the mover of the motion, who was the minister, should. Now the speaker arrogated to himself, which is against our rules, to become the mover. He left his seat as the Speaker of Parliament. The presiding officer came and sat as a Minister of Finance, moved his own motion. Then 2, the statement that the minister should have brought to clarify, the statement was not provided to us. Then 3, there were 2 reports presented to the House. The report by the majority and the report by the minority. Before you proceed, you must dispose of those 2 reports, because minority means it is contesting. So you first put the procedure is, you put the question for members to either accept or reject the minority first.
Yes. And so you adopt
yes.
majority.
So if members accept the minority, it means now you have to put the question for the majority to be rejected. So either way, but you start with the question on the minority report, which was not done. Then question on the majority report, it was not done. So the House has not taken decision, has not adopted formally those reports, and those are the reports that has informed the decision on what government should do. So that is another fault line which happened. But again, when he proceeded, myself and colleagues sought to raise issues under Rule 78 of Rules of Procedure of Parliament. If a member stands up and mentions order and procedure, I will start with those 2. If it is the member of Parliament who is on the floor, that member is commanded to sit down. I know this rule has been abused, but the moment a colleague gets up and says procedure or order, the member on the floor must sit down. And this member then raises their procedural matter, and the speaker is supposed to give a ruling. The only 2 points that cannot be accepted is when you want to give information. It is at the discretion of the member holding the floor to allow you supplement by giving information, or if you have reason to ask for clarification, it's also at the discretion of the member to allow you clarify. So the 2 rules on order and procedure is mandatory.
So even the speaker can't decide.
Even the speaker, the moment a member says procedure or order, even the speaker has no, the speaker must. Except that the order must be when somebody is holding the floor. Now, when I sought to raise procedure, the speaker denied me, and it's on record. When you check that video, you will see this evidence. Then I said, Mr. Speaker, we have no quorum. He had not yet put the question. Our rules of procedure on quorum, Rule 25, I think, says, before a question is put on any matter for members of Parliament to vote, the speaker shall establish and confirm that they require. So even before moving the speaker, before you move the speaker is commanded by law to establish that the quorum is there. But if a member now raises and informs the speaker, in case the speaker had not paid attention to that, it is then mandatory for the speaker to stop and establish quorum. The speaker did not do that. Then when it went to the question, we have 4 types of voting in Parliament. We have voice voting. We can vote by show of hands. We can vote electronically by if there is a gadget for us to vote and do that. And then there is a voting by division. So you just divide the house and say those who will agree, you go this side, this will say, then you count. So the speaker went for the voice voting, which is provided in the rules. Now the voice voting, those who will say aye and those who will say nay will mention it. The speaker is required to declare the results. When you put the question, people say it and the speaker declares. If the speaker declares the result which is not reflective of the voting, which is what happened, that the no's actually people shouted no and there was no yes, but the speaker chose to say it was yes, the ayes have it. The rules say if 40 or more members stand up, and we did, it means they are contesting the decision of the speaker, the declaration of results. The speaker is supposed to stop and say, okay, I'm dividing the house. So the left lobby, people who are saying no, go to the left lobby. People who are saying yes, go to my right lobby. And the clerks then come and count them.
Yeah.
That is the appeal process that is provided within the rules of procedure of Parliament. On any decision that you are contesting, if 40 members stand up, and the speaker is supposed to be, that's why where the speaker sits has all the vantage view of all the members. So when members rise up, you are able to see that. I can tell you that the speaker put his own question, voted on it, and declared results, and even started running from the seat before he could adjourn the house. By the time he was adjourning, he took off. When we followed him, we found the speaker had disappeared. He literally ran away from the house, meaning that he knew that what he was doing was wrong. These are facts, you can't. These are facts, he literally ran away.
I guess I told you that the man is
But it's, I don't know why we are laughing. It's actually sad.
No, it is very sad because you see, the office of the speaker, just like for us members of Parliament, is a constitutional office.
Yes.
Because this is illegal. This doesn't even, it's not even binding.
So when the speaker put this question to himself, voted on it, declared the results, he did it while literally running away from the chair. And even by the decorum of Parliament, you cannot be a presiding officer when you are not seated. So when you make pronouncement when you're already running away, that means that you are not, the authority, the constitutional authority to even make that declaration, it's already out.
You don't have it.
You don't have it. So the speaker literally ran from his seat to the VIP room and he left behind the technical team, the clerks that usually should lead for him the way. He left behind the sergeant at arms that should actually take. Basically, he had to flee because he knew he had done
and
something.
Left people up in arms.
Yes, because he ignored. There were protests from both sides of the house. The most decent thing that members of Parliament expect in that house, we are all products of elections or products of voting. In voting, somebody will have the upper hand and you lose. But the processes must comply with the rules. The processes must be transparent and people must be allowed to express. So that expression from both sides, even the members who wanted probably to vote high, did not get opportunity. Did not get opportunity to do that.
So he answered it as soon as he asked the question.
Exactly. And he moved away. And he was even reading from his own document. He was reading. The text was prepared from him. Ask the question like this, answer it like this, and do this. And that is not how the House should be. The office of the Speaker or the presiding officer is a very serious office that you are presiding over national matters, and it has consequences. For example, on this one, 207 billion is at stake. And I can tell you that before the lapse of this Parliament, the question of Roko will come. Either Roko, the directors will just pick this money and flee back to their country. And that will be it.
But also it can be challenged in court. That can't be a resolution of Parliament if it happened without following the rules of procedure. No quorum. There have been cases before.
Yes, it can, but unfortunately, courts do not move themselves. Somebody has to volunteer.
The good thing, it doesn't have to be a member of Parliament.
It doesn't have to be a member of Parliament. Any Ugandan can do that. And you know, our justice system is not free. You have to pay for the lawyers, you have to facilitate them. And at this moment where things are difficult, I don't know which Ugandan is ready to do that.
Okay, Honourable, thank you very much for ably explaining to us what happened. And I wanted to ask, now that he has explained it, do you have any comments on it before we leave this issue?
Yeah. So as he really narrated, we were all seated there, and we thought now the House was going to close. The Speaker was going to close the House, but then he said, honourable members have received a message regarding Roko. He said it's a live or die thing. And he said if we don't take a vote on Roko, Roko will have to die. Then people say, okay, let it die and whatever. So people started reacting, and he said we must take a vote on it now. So people were actually, it caught people by surprise because people didn't expect it. Because as the Honourable Jonathan has said,
How does that make you feel as a member of Parliament?
I was how do I call it, flabbergasted to see that the Parliament that we respect so much when we are outside there, the conduct can be done that way. So it was quite unfortunate. For me, it was very, very sad. It was a sad day,
Okay.
a sad day yesterday. And hopefully,
It can be rectified.
it can be rectified, because you see, that was not a decision of the House.
Yeah.
Where I'm seated was
Honourable Charles, having heard what Honourable Jonathan says about that incident, do you have any comment about it?
Yes, when I heard about it in my head, I'm like, but I thought there are a number of firewalls. This can't just pass like that.
That was
So
the first question you asked
yes,
when you got
first
here.
question, I'm like, there are members in the House. So were they part of the whole thing? Did they connive? Because I've sat in Parliament and I know I've seen a number of controversial things, and people really put up a spirited fight before the tree finally bends. But he has, Honourable Odur has put it in, he has built up the entire case from the procedure issues, the number of checks, the number of files, and he has put it into perspective for us and the viewers to understand. And I think based on that, because I was wondering, why is this Roko thing in a hurry? There is a loan request, for example, for Uganda Heart Institute. And it has come through Parliament, Committee on National Economy, then to the End User Committee, which is Health. We sat interfaced with Heart Institute. We went to do due diligence on the land in Naguru. That was on Monday. And it has been now, the heart is the driver of the body.
Yeah.
You understand? But we need to have this Heart Institute on Naguru Hill for us to be able to do open and closed heart surgery. Modern. So that one is, I think, more pressing. But we are going systematically, following the procedure and all that. And I'm finishing my report, which I'll hand over to National Economy and then to the Committee of the entire House.
Yes.
Now, I'm wondering, why is this one so urgent? And like he clearly put it, that it was literally in the morgue, and we were trying to resuscitate it with defibrillators and to bring it back to ICU. So he's put it into perspective, and I think...
in fact, the reason for the hurry, they said the bankers have to make a decision. If you delay it, this thing will not... Now, I'm a banker. Do you have something which you're going to pay, payments that we are going to make in 1 year's time? If they already agreed that they are going to give the money, why do you have to hurry?
To hurry to
approve.
Yes.
That's all yesterday.
Which is why I think the money is going to come immediately, not take a year like you think.
No, but the money, I think, will come sooner than it is projected.
Okay. Gentlemen, I loved this discussion, but let's discuss something else, the issue of the Public Health Amendment Bill. And I'm glad I have someone who chaired the committee and the other who critiqued it. The issues that were there, and you will help us, Honourable Charles, to update us on how it finally ended, were the issues of mandatory vaccination, for example. We have a constitution that gives a lot of rights and freedoms. When laws come and they want to go away to divert from that, people are going to be up in arms that you shouldn't force me to vaccinate, for example. But that also, we look at now the issue of vaccination for COVID-19 and the intake of the vaccination, so there's need to strike a balance. How did your committee deal with these issues that seemed a bit controversial in the Public Health Amendment Bill?
Thank you, Agatha. First and foremost, if we just went back a bit, that the Public Health Bill, the Act had never been amended in 87 years.
Yeah.
It was enacted in 1935. 1935, that was it just maybe before that was around the Second World War?
No, before. Second World War is 10 years later, I think.
It's probably around
Yeah.
the same time.
45.
That was when it ended, but it's probably started
Yeah,
around the
So
same
it's
time.
really a long time, yeah.
And if you put it into context, penicillin was discovered in 1928 by Alexander Fleming. Commercial production began in 1941. So I'm just trying to put this thing into perspective that it was a very old act. But then again, having gone through it, I must really salute the people who crafted it at that time, because in the general principle, it was applicable. It could still be used. But when you look at the justification for amendment, some of the penalties were still using hundreds of shillings. You know, inflation and all that's taken over. It was not applicable. If somebody's, those deterrent penalties, you're giving somebody 200 shillings, it was not applicable. A corporation, you're going to fine them 1,000 shillings.
At that time, the value was very high.
So it wasn't deterrent enough. They have been, and that act speaks more towards communicable diseases, because they were the ones that the colonialists, and also in the global perspective, likes of malaria, bacterial infections, they were on the center stage. If you remember, syphilis was a big thing globally. If you remember the mafia cartel, the Al Capones, they were being knocked down by syphilis. So the discovery of penicillin and other antibiotics over time was a very major breakthrough. So they are no longer public health threats. Along the way, maybe in the last 40 years, we've had hemorrhagic fevers of viral origin, the likes of Ebola, the likes of Marburg, Crimean Congo fever. And these are hemorrhagic fevers, some of them with fatality rates of about 95%. But the Act was not really speaking to that. And then, of course, over the last 40 years, we have had more of non-communicable diseases. And 34% of the ailments we see in outpatients and in inpatients speak towards non-communicable diseases. So the Act spoke more towards communicable diseases. That's infectious. In 1935, I think there was probably one car in Kampala. That probably must have been for the governor. You understand? Bicycles were also maybe a bit rare. But right now, when you look at non-communicable diseases, which encompasses accidents, accidents and injuries, drowning inclusive, those were not there in the past.
There was not drowning in the past? Or was there not drowning in the past, or the Act just hadn't...
Not to the magnitude of right now. Swimming pools, population increase, and better documentation, of course. So you had 12,000 road traffic accidents in 2020, and 3,000 were fatal. That's huge. That's a public health concern. Then you have the cancers, which are on the rise. You have cardiovascular accidents, the heart attacks and all that. You have mental health. I remember 2 months ago, they were saying 14 million Ugandans
have mental
health. Diabetes and all that. So there was justification to amend this bill to include components of NCDs to make the government accountable but more responsive to NCDs. Then there were some sections that were really obsolete. Like I said, venereal diseases, like you had the Venereal Diseases Act of 1977. So there were all these components of venereal diseases, sections in the Act. And then, of course, the part of vaccination or immunization was titled smallpox. Now, smallpox was declared a non-public health hazard in 1980 by WHO, but it's still there in what? In the Act. So we wanted to collapse the Immunization Act of 2017, get excerpts of it, and
Incorporated.
remove the title smallpox, put immunization, and then put those excerpts there. But the amendment of this act was timely. We had come from a global health pandemic.
Yeah.
We're still in
Yeah.
the pandemic. And for me, I think that's the biggest public health lesson. When you hear our president talking about herd immunity and all that, it brought awareness to everybody, and that the prevention arm of our health services should be spoken about more than the curative.
Yeah.
And so all these inclusions were in there. Now, when we interfaced with, when we put it in the Gazette and invited stakeholders, we got so many, both written, but also those who came in the physical. But most of them were skewed towards immunization. Actually, most of them thought that the act is about
immunization,
but in particular, COVID. So you'd see a conglomerate of like 6 people, some of them ladies, and they would come and put up a spirited fight against mandatory immunization. But the interesting thing is, a number of these clauses are there in the Immunization Act of 2017. We have the routine diseases, which are 10, and we have a combination of 5 vaccines. Then we have situations of immunization in emerging threats. You understand? So we have the routine, and then there is immunization when there are emerging threats. Now, I think some people are mixing the two, but we had to unpack it and then tell people that, listen, for the childhood illnesses, let's make it mandatory, because children don't have voice. A child will, when they're 18 years old, time to get married, ask, but why am I lame? I got residual polio because I was not immunized. Some of these people who are deaf, there's congenital deafness, but there's that one that you acquire. You had until maybe when you are 10, then you get probably rubella.
Meningitis or
Yes, you get meningitis or rubella, messes up your hearing system. And that's why you can distinguish. Some of those can actually talk and phonate in terms of sound, because they once had sound and they're able now to. Then when they became deaf, they're still able to talk. So those are some of the things we needed to ensure, because we can prevent a number of these diseases. And immunization is not a bad thing. There's proof, there's scientific evidence that immunization has led to declaration of diseases to be non-public health threats. Like I gave you an example of smallpox and, of course, rinderpest in cattle. So I think those were the areas. And but I would thank my brother and colleagues for also checking us and putting up a spirited fight. We were able to agree in principle that we should not make it mandatory. But
so that's vaccination for everything, or for some of the diseases?
For the diseases where there are novel vaccines, the newly emerged diseases, because the others have been tested over time, and their public health merits are known. But when there is a new disease that has come up, and then vaccine production is quickly propagated, there has to be a lot of sensitization, awareness by the government, consultation. But we also checked that bit. Once we remove that, we still maintain the fact that those who go and propagate false information should be penalized, held accountable.
Okay. So, Honourable Odur, what were your issues with the bill?
Well, first of all, I want to agree that the bigger question should have been, was there a need for an amendment? Definitely yes. The law was an old one. And most of these laws that were passed during colonial times, some of them had repressive clauses that were clothed with intention of health managing the public health, but the real desire was to do something. For example, those days, I'm told if you are declared to have had syphilis or gonorrhea or something, you would be in trouble. And also at that time, he's a medical doctor. When we were growing up, there were these misinformation that would go that you can actually pick syphilis from the washrooms and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in terms of the law is actually made, first of all, to inform people of what you should not do, to prohibit you, and then for you to know that if you do such a thing, there is a sanction going to come. So in terms of the sanctions that were there, things that have emerged, there was need to amend it. What we raised as objection was, rightfully in our thinking, that the preamble to the bill and some of the statements that were coming from the executive painted the whole public health bill to appear as if a bill coming to propagate those who refuse COVID vaccination.
Yeah.
And when you hear from the ministers and the rest, some of them have mentioned that. I think that is the first fault line, like the chairman of the committee noted, that the bill was touching so many other important things, but because of the sensitivity of the discussions around COVID vaccination and information that are coming from left, right, and center about what has happened in Brazil, you read that the Supreme Court or one of their courts have made a ruling that you cannot vaccinate people compulsorily. I think in the US, some of the states, there is also information coming that maybe some of the vaccines are not yet as safe as it is. We are told that the current vaccines are under emergency approval or something like that. So we needed to separate, in our layman's thinking, vaccines that have been tested over time that work for children. And those ones should be put under another category. I think it was captured under Clause 38 of the bill. The ones that we know about polio and the rest, and we don't have any problem with it. But under Clause 49, I think it was proposed, the one mandatory vaccination for adults. So it was lifted a bit from the Immunization Act, which was talking about the smallpox, but then the smallpox aspect was removed. That now brought in also the issue of COVID vaccination. Now there are so many vaccines, I'm not an expert on it, how they work or how they don't work. But
MRA, what?
MR.
Yes.
Rubella.
But these are debates that are going out there. So for somebody to accept to be compulsorily subjected to vaccination, it means that it must be something that is not contested along the world. So from what I know, if you put some two medical doctors or people who have experience in producing vaccine, they will argue here the whole night. This one saying, no, it works, this one raising questions. So it means there is something still that needs to be addressed. That is the concern that we had. That now that the world seems to be divided at the moment about this particular vaccine, that nobody knows after 5 years or 10 years what it does, it should not be mandatory. You can still persuade people. And I'm glad at the end of it all, when we raised it, the chairman and the Minister of Health, it came from the debate. The whole House had raised objection about it. There were so many petitions coming to members of Parliament. There were also media stories talking about people who got vaccinated and probably had one or two issues. So the minister considered that and said, no, we will not make it mandatory. When it came to the committee stage, the chairman also agreed, and then we said, let it be optional. So by doing that, we removed the penalty because it had prescribed a penalty. I think, if I remember, it was
3 months and
yes,
fine,
3 months or a
one-
fine of 2 million or something.
million.
Yes. So that was removed. So as we passed it to become a bill for an act, the intention of Parliament and what has been passed is that there will not be mandatory vaccination for, let me call them adults, apart from the routine, for lack of better word, the routine immunization that are given to children from birth up to, I think, age of 15 or something like that.
Okay, thank you, Honourable. Honourable Paul, what is your view when we have a law that says that, that doesn't require mandatory vaccination, but we have other institutions at school, for example. I think like at LDC, people had to be vaccinated to sit exams. I think also traveling in other countries, when you're going to those countries, you have to either be vaccinated or you are subjected to tests that others who are vaccinated are not subjected to. And I think there's so many of these institutions that would be requiring for you to do this, you must be vaccinated. Wouldn't that make it mandatory in a sense?
No, it wouldn't. But first of all, I must start by thanking the chairman,
Yes.
Honourable Dr. Ayume, for a fantastic work that he and the committee did. It made our work in Parliament a little easier to handle the bill.
Yeah.
And as he has narrated, you know, for so many years, since 1935,
Yeah.
up to date. In fact, when I was seated in the House, I was wondering, why did it take so long for us to
There are so many like that.
to look
like
at
those laws that
to look at it?
Witchcraft Act.
Yes.
1925.
So, but I think what they did was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
They included very many things regarding public health. Now, the most controversial one, of course, is what the Honourable Jonathan talked about, which is on vaccination.
Yeah.
I was in Lira, Mr. Chairman. I was in Lira and I was put on a radio station. People are saying, we don't want it to be forcefully vaccinated over this thing. And of course, you know, there are people with a lot of theories about especially COVID vaccines. There are others who don't even want to touch it. So
because if even people who have gone to school
Yes.
don't want to vaccinate, I can imagine you people in Lira.
yes.
Yeah.
So the people in Lira, people are saying, no, we don't want this thing. What, as our MP, what are you going to do about it? And my answer was then that we will not accept mandatory vaccination. And it's good the minister considered, because there's still two worlds.
Yeah.
You have this side saying this is safe, the other, the same. These are medical people, not us. For us, we are functionally literate.
Yeah.
So you find a group set of scientists are saying it's safe, this one is saying it's not. So let it be optional so that people can do it. Regarding your question, I think it depends on the individual.
Yes.
There are certain countries that when you're going to, they'll require that you get maybe vaccinated. If that is the case, now it depends. It's an individual choice. Whether that
To go to that country,
when you go to that country and to go and do whatever you want to do, is it so important that you can take a jab over something you drastically disagree
if
with?
it's acquiring the university education,
Exactly.
can you choose between that and taking a job?
My friend, now it depends. I have my daughter at school, and now they were saying compulsory vaccination, and I'm not in for it. I've taken, but keep our children free. And I think the ministry came up and said there will be no compulsory vaccination of children. So I think let's have the law in place. Let it be optional. If you want to go somewhere now, like for example, that this is a bit different. In Rwanda, when you're in Rwanda, it's compulsory for HIV testing. That's something different. It's not vaccination, but it is testing. In Uganda, I think they don't tell you, but they will. I think they whisper to you and say, to protect the baby, we will test you.
When a woman is pregnant.
When a woman is pregnant, we will test you for
HIV.
HIV, so that we can protect your baby in case anything happens. I think that's for the
But
good.
you have a right to say no.
You have a right to say no. But I think now they just inform. I think they do the testing. In Uganda now they have started that. But for vaccination, I think it's something that people must choose.
Yeah.
But even here in Uganda, I think the directives, because COVID came and caused a lot of panic
Yes.
in the world.
Yes.
And up to today, people are not really very certain of what is the correct line of handling it.
Yes.
COVID.
Because even with vaccination, the doctor will agree, at some point it was stated as if you got vaccinated with either the 1 dose or the 2 doses, you're okay. But immediately issues started coming that you'll need a second booster. And in some areas we are told now there is a 4th booster and something. So nobody knows what will happen.
Yes.
So some of the institutions that made decisions to block students who are studying, they did that because at that time we did not have a law. But now with this law, you cannot force any student that you must present yourself. In Uganda, it would be
illegal
for you to demand that if you are not vaccinated with COVID, you cannot access a service from us, even at the hospital, because even the hospitals have started. If you went to a government hospital, I think the practice was if not, they first start by vaccinating you and you go. But now, with this law, you can stand and challenge them. And we have provided that all actions under the Public Health Act must be done in good faith. So good faith means that a public, we have called them a vaccinator or public vaccinator or the medical practitioner. Before vaccinating, you must do it in good faith. Okay? So if they are doing something that does not promote your health, then they can be held liable. For other countries, when you are traveling, they have their own sets of law. For example, there are countries you cannot go and drink alcohol. So you will have to determine whether you are going to go there or not. So we cannot talk about
you can't even go with a bottle in the bag.
But when we had arrived at that decision, the ministry's penalties were high. As a committee, we brought it a bit down.
But still left penalties.
And you could still have the discretion of the presiding judicial officer. The way I know mankind, if you gave them excessive freedom, I can imagine there's a public health threat. And they're just people generally in life who are anarchists or people who don't like being on the right side of the law. You understand? We have seen that in several, like even in schools, when they would say it's time,
but as a doctor,
time to go to class, there are those people who want to stand in
Mr. Chairman, as a doctor, how do you strike a balance between consent of a patient, which is very important, and also the need to like a contagious disease like COVID to you understand what I'm saying, that you want to leave people with that freedom of consent, but also you know the dangers of not forcing them to take vaccination. How do you strike a balance there?
Well, as a doctor in practice, there have been several times when you've advised somebody and they do not consent, and then they walk out. So you write there, discharged against medical advice, or somebody rejected medical advice. There's a time there was somebody who had penile cancer in my early years of practice, and he was due for amputation. So we told him, go and consult with your partner. He came back, the girl said, no, you're not going to amputate and reduce the length of the shaft. And they walked out. And I kid you me, the cancer must have progressed to the rest of the body. I don't think, wherever, this was maybe 15 years ago, I don't think he's alive. He definitely should have died.
So he said, no, so we keep this.
We keep this, but this is your better half.
Honourable Paul is very
but
what a decision.
But the point I wanted to make is that we cannot insulate this discussion of mandatory vaccine against access to wrong information that circulates on the media. That the access to information is better now than before. Two, the economics behind the pharmaceutical industry, the political economics behind the pharmaceutical industry. There are those competition wars where there's a time people are saying that when you get Pfizer, you'll get erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
It's just like there's a time there was war here between mineral water companies.
Yes.
And I think Renzori, I think they got people injecting sewer water through that. And trust me, people's affinity for Renzori dropped for about 4 or 5 years, while the others peaked. So you cannot hide away from the fact that that plays a role where people say, no, Sinovac is much better, you feel right, there's no this. And then you slam the others that are on the market. But what is the science behind immunization? And I think there was a study in the US. Most vaccinated states, top 5, against the least 5. And mortality and morbidity, deaths and the level of illness you get was higher in the least vaccinated
Country.
States.
Yeah.
So there is evidence that points towards that the vaccines were working. But it's very hard for us to prove that any death. There was a member of parliament who said in their constituency there were a number of deaths and all that. You cannot, there are so many confounders that could have led to deaths.
You can't attribute it to vaccination.
Attribute it to that.
Okay.
Where the government has to come in is to try and investigate. But on that consent form, there's also a section for adverse reactions. So those are some of the safety nets. And even in the Immunization Act, there's a section that for a parent who has a child and you're not fit to be vaccinated, you can still provide that. And it is signed off by the what? A medical officer. So there were safety nets before you would get to actually these sections of the penalties. Now, in the colonial times, there were so many laws that were punitive to get the Ugandan to comply. I think when you looked at what was this, a graduated tax?
Graduated taxes.
I think there was the Nguli Act.
Yeah.
If you left mankind to determine his own fate, we have seen that with hepatitis B. We get a lot of hepatitis vaccines from Gavi, and the hepatitis belt is northern Uganda, Karamoja into Teso. People took the first shot, poor compliance, second shot, third shot, no compliance. Vaccines got expired. This is quite costly. So as government, we are saying, do we still proceed? And I know very many people are dying of hepatitis B.
Okay, Honourable, my last question on this one is on criminalization versus what's the other word? Because I remember during the HIV Act, the bill, there was that problem of, because even now it's there, that if you intentionally infect someone, there's a criminal. So and now it was also here that there's a penalty for not doing this. Also, in your experience, does criminalization work better or sensitization and telling people about, because criminalization will mean that people are actually going to shy away from the things you actually would like them to do. That in the case of HIV, for example, people are not going to test, because if tests will show that I'm sick and I infected poor and I am going to be criminalized, and that will tend to have a negative effect from what you envisaged. So that versus trying to prevent these diseases, how does it work?
I think the two can coexist. And as I said, the person also who is a first timer, they should be some level of safety nets. Why does the URA Act have sensitization and then criminalization? Because much as there are those people who don't want to be immunized, and in my opinion, they could be the minority. There are those who want to live in a clean environment. You want to send your child, you want to go to a baptism, to a party, and you know you're in safe hands. Not these things where you hear people who are at Dr. Omara's wedding, 4 days later, like half the guests have COVID. You understand? And this is because now the severity, probably the kind of strains we are getting are less severe. But I want people to go back to last May, whereby everybody was looking for an ICU bed in this country. Some people would literally park outside in Zambia, Mulago ICU, waiting for somebody to drop dead. And my phone calls were buzzing. People are looking for oxygen cylinders. It was horrific. The time when that second wave was attributed to kids coming from school, we are very quick to forget that 1.5 months of horror where people died. And now that we're getting maybe less invasive strains, people can in layman's language, talk badly.
I want to say to say something around that awareness creation and then criminalization. and picking maybe HIV as an example. We have the Honourable here who is a lawyer. Now, I don't know how you will prosecute if, for example, two people had sex and one didn't have, one had.
Yeah.
And it was consensual.
Yes.
And both of them are adults, and you're supposed to protect yourself. That awareness, you already have it.
Yeah.
And you go into something, you've not tested your partner, and you get it. How do you prosecute? Unless maybe now the lawyers will go that and say, okay, me, if I'm on drugs, I know I'm on drugs, on what? ARVs, and then I go intentionally to have live sex with somebody else who is innocent, who could not be having it. Then maybe if you can establish that history, I should be penalized, I should be punished. But the question now is, how do you prosecute?
But also, how do you decipher intention? How do you know that I knew and I infected someone?
You see,
so some laws are good, but then the question is, when do you apply it as a legal system?
Probably it's difficult to compare the two scenarios and how you deal with it legally. Because I think that the whole problem around vaccination was because of the mismanagement that happened around COVID. How we, the politicians, and people who are in power behaved themselves, which kind of sent a signal to the public as if COVID is not a serious thing.
Like Bojo.
Yes.
Who went drinking.
In our case here, you remember it was political thing. The minister was caught, the Minister of Health went and held a rally. There was no mass, people were around. So, you know, those are things that
big shots were flying the family.
Yes, those are things that begin to create doubt in the minds of the people.
Yeah.
And I also think that our medical facilities also were not prepared to handle that shock. So there could have been mistakes here and then. For example, later I read that some of the medications they were giving people later were recalled. The initial ones, the doctors discovered you should not treat them on this. There are people who went and were put on some other type of oxygen because people were just looking for any type of oxygen. I mean, industrial oxygen. And some people could have died from the information, from rushing. Then there are people who just out of fear were feeling they were sick when probably they were not sick. Then you had the commercial interest, people who wanted to fill in their hospital. So everything got crowded. Then it came to us in Parliament. There was a cash bonanza. So whatever we did actually underscored the threat that was there in COVID. So we made it look like it is not a serious thing.
People are using this as an excuse to
Now, when issues came to vaccination, I think government made a very big mistake. That cases that were highly publicized, we should have gotten a report. You remember, I think there's a medical doctor at either UCU, one of the universities, a student, medical student. It was widely publicized that she got vaccinated and had this issue. We have people in my constituency, one of my distant cousins got vaccinated 2 or 3 days, he passed on. It was referred. So if the government had followed up, followed up on these matters and raised them, it would now increase people's confidence in these matters. So for me, I think that is a great lesson that you know, people who are in government has learned. And then I hope that people can treat such urgent or emergent pandemics with the care and attention it deserves, so that it works. Then the other aspect I wanted to point out is that I was in Parliament. For example, in the North, there were this perception nationally, it's not only in the North, that these other vaccines from some countries were more safer. You know, there are some countries that people think they make fake things, they're associated with making fake things. So these are things that entered into the minds of the people. So when the vaccines were sent in the North, some of the vaccines, in our opinion, look like vaccines that had expired. because they had mentioned it September best used before September.
Yes.
September reached and people in government were arguing that it is 30th of September. And yet, for us, we know when they say expiry date, once it mentions September, means used before September started.
Yes.
So when people would look at it, people would say, no, I will not allow to be vaccinated by something that. So I think the issue of awareness must work. On trying to criminalize someone, the laws are made so that people are punished for breaches that can affect others. But I think the one on HIV was really out of context. I cannot even compare it to the one of vaccination. I think vaccination is something else. Because you have rightly pointed, for me to be held criminally liable, I must be aware of something. Vaccination is actually very easy for you to know that I'm vaccinated or not. But for HIV, you need to go and test for you to know. So that fear of knowing that if I go there and it will now deny me opportunity to, socialize and I will be punished.
It will land me in jail.
Exactly. So takes people away. So I think the one of HIV is really out of context. But the one on other health things, well, it might make sense.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I am afraid our time is fast spent, but I want to give each one 1 minute to give parting shots on the two issues we have discussed. I'll start with you, Honourable Man.
Thank you very much. The Roko issue has been badly handled. In future, it might come to hurt us. I don't know whether there is going to be any remedy. My senior is here in parliamentary terms, but all incident around it was unfortunate. On the public health bill which Parliament passed, I think it's a good one. It is robust, it's comprehensive. It's going to help us deal with very many medical issues. I hope that the awareness creation that we have talked about is made available to the population so that we understand what we are dealing with.
Thank you, Honourable. Honourable Jonathan.
On the Roko thing, we sat this morning as people who are aggrieved by the decision of the Speaker. Rule 87, sub-rule 2, provides that we can raise a substantive motion that should be debated to overturn the decision of the Speaker. We are exercising that option. We have also put on notice the partners who are involved in the Roko, including PTA Bank.
Yes.
We think they're a very reputable bank that should not be part of
a fraud.
Perpetuating fraud that has come to their attention. So we have agreed that we are going to write to them. They're a good bank, but they shouldn't, because there are queries that have been raised in Parliament. We also want to invite the substantive Speaker of Parliament, because the sitting yesterday was done by the Speaker. This morning, the leader of the opposition met her. We think that she should...
Was that by Deputy Speaker?
Yes, yes. But this morning, the leader of the opposition met the Speaker, and we think we can have this debate be brought back. We are not saying people are not going to vote yes or no. You never know. Let them persuade the House and do it the right way, give members opportunity to vote so that the record captures that actually Parliament cleared it or rejected it. So we think that the executive should respect the legislatures, because we are accountable to the people, and let them come back and address the issues that Parliament raised. Then at the end of it all, if it is not viable, like we have pointed out, or it is viable, that decision will be made. On the public health bill, I hope the President will sign as it is, because he reserves some veto powers under the Constitution to return it. We hope he can find that
like
Parliament...
he has been returning many.
Yes. Because to process a bill, as the doctor will tell you, takes a lot of time. And Parliament has so many things to do. If there are one or two issues that have not been addressed, it can always be addressed in the future.
Okay.
And I want to take the opportunity to thank Honourable Dr. Ayume, when you come to Parliament from a particular profession, your colleagues out there hold you to a very high standard, and they expect you to do something like that. So when things of health come, including even the budget allocation, I know the blame that may be coming to him may be unbearable. When it comes to banking issues, like people will say, how can Paul be
Like
part
how you
of
were
that?
saying you're disappointed.
Exactly. So
But
I want to thank.
I didn't start. Please thank me also. Although I couldn't stop it.
No, the correct thing that you should have done, because your knowledge and
He didn't
expertise.
sign it.
No, he didn't. But the correct thing you should have done was to write your own minority report to guide
Or
members.
to sign the minority
Or to sign the
report,
minority.
yes.
Because we don't also want to miss your expertise. That opinion must be on
You
record.
need to be on record for
So that
having
to help.
disagreed.
That would be
now
the
no
other
one
thing.
knows.
Yeah. So I want
Yes.
to thank the doctor for that process.
Yes, Honourable Ayume.
Thank you very much. On the side of Roko, I think there's a lot of information that we need to know as members of Parliament. So I would probably expect the Committee on Finance to tease out a number of things, the liabilities. I don't know if we know who the shareholders are. And the strategic direction, he guided that it would have been best for the country if people had bought shares, because we're now like trying to resuscitate a company by what are the chances that it will collapse again. But not all hope is lost. I think there are, in the rules, there are ways in which you can bring it back to the floor for discussion, even after the speaker has ruled. So
yeah, the lawyer has told us they're already
in the process.
So I think that opportunity is there. Then on the side of the public health amendment bill, I would were really quite happy, given us sleepless nights. I told it hadn't been amended in 87 years. But it was also quite bulky. I think 138 sections. And then the bill had 93 clauses. So even when I was presenting it, I was looking at a report, I was looking at a bill, I was looking at
so many things
at the act at the same time. Because there are some bills that will come in with maybe 12 clauses, and you run through it.
Okay.
Quite well, you could even see the fatigue on the speaker that day, because she had to go through all the 93 clauses.
Yeah, and there's a way she has made it a point to pass every bill in one sitting. It never used to be the case in the previous parliaments. I don't know. Her target is very.
And she's
peculiar.
very serious. The speaker is very serious.
I don't know if that is what it means, but. Well done, Honourable.
So our prayer is that the president assents.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. It is rare for me to have only gentlemen. I am a feminist who always prefers to have gender balance, but today we failed to have Honourable Saro Pendi.
Yes.
But thank you all for coming, for sparing time, and thank you for the good work. I also read the report, and we had actually studied that bill in the health law, health and the law at school, and we're talking about there's a lecturer who has got a niche in health law now, Professor Shokoro, and he had so many issues with that particular act. So I think he would be happy with you as well. Thank you, gentlemen, and I am going to say one thing I always say here, that we hold Parliament more accountable than other arms of government.
Yes.
I had Honourable Zindana here last week, and he was saying that when they were considering the constitution in the CA, that it was deliberate for Parliament to come first before the executive and before the judiciary, because it is considered the more important part and the more powerful arm of government. So we actually expect that you people counter things like this of Parliament passing resolutions, motions and laws without following procedure, and history will judge you. Honourable Katesh told me what you said here, that it's a young parliament, average of 40 years. You think this is our Uganda. And yes, you are not like people who are in there last years. But thank you. Here from us at Focus on Parliament, we wish you a very good weekend. We'll return next weekend.